Call to order this Committee of the Whole meeting of the Bloomington Common Council for April 28th, 2021. We have 3 items on our agenda this evening. This is likely to be a lengthy meeting, and so I would like the council to consider recessing by midnight. And for that, we will need a motion at the time that we recess. So please consider if someone would like to make that motion. Of course, if you care to recess earlier, you could make a motion and we could take a vote on that. So, our agenda this evening will proceed with the following legislation. As soon as I find it, we have 3 items. Those are Ordinance 2126 to amend Title 15 of the Bloomington Municipal Code entitled Vehicles and Traffic regarding amending Chapter 15.37 Residential Neighborhood Permit Parking to add a penalty for using a residential neighborhood parking permit in an unauthorized manner. Section 15.37.080, proof of permit purchase required to add a penalty for not displaying a neighborhood parking or visitor permit when parked in a residential neighborhood zone, and adding that penalty to the list of Class G traffic violations, Section 15.37.100, replacement of permit, to require permit holders to report stolen permits to the police before receiving a free replacement. And Section 15.48.010, general provisions to require people who have their cars towed after they have accumulated 6 or more unpaid parking citations to pay their unpaid citations before their car will be released to them. Our second item is Ordinance 2123 to amend Title 20 of the Unified Development Ordinance of the Bloomington Municipal Code regarding regulations related to dwelling, duplex, dwelling, triplex, and dwelling fourplex set forth in Bloomington Municipal Code 20.03 and 20.04. And then our third item this evening is Ordinance 2124 to repeal and replace the official zoning map within Title 20 of the Bloomington Municipal Code entitled Unified Development Ordinance. So those are our 3 items this evening. Let's begin with our first item. Ms. Wall, will you be presenting?
Yes, I will.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you. I know your time is sensitive tonight, and so I have doing a very concise, detailed analysis, hopefully as transparent as possible. So under the first synopsis, the use of a parking permit in an unauthorized manner. The first 3 of these synopses came up due to COVID, moving to online permit sales, and mailing the permit. This is necessary change to be made to the ordinance for the first 3 items. Number 4 is being proposed to standardize our towing practices. So the first one, the use of a permit in an unauthorized manner, this violation will be established at $100. And I'll give an example of that. If an officer finds a permit on a vehicle and another customer has purchased this permit, but has claimed non-receipt of the permit, and we find it in the field, they will be issued this violation. The second one is non-display of a parking permit. As I mentioned before, we mail the permit, but the customer has not displayed the permit. Officer will give them a one-time warning of non-display, and if found again with permit, no permit displayed, they will issue them a citation for non-display, which is a violation of $20. The officer can see if a permit has been assigned to that individual on their handheld device. Lost and stolen report forms. If a person loses their permit after receipt, we request this form to be filled out, and then the customer is charged a $10 replacement fee. If a person claims non-receipt of a permit, they are required to fill out this form, and replacement is received free of charge, like if they didn't receive it through the mail. And if a person permit is stolen, We just ask that the form is filled out and accompanied with a police report, and then we waive the fee. We feel like they've been victimized once. We don't want to do that again to them. So all of these permits are kept in our T2 database that have been reported lost or stolen, and the officer can find them in the field and cite them when found. It is necessary for number 4, it's necessary for me to explain the current code process of how a vehicle gets towed and the customer's process to retrieve that vehicle. Currently, the code states you can be towed if you have 4 unpaid parking citations. However, the last citation received has to be 60 days old. If someone gets towed under the current code, the person is required to go to the police department to get a tow release and pay an administrative fee of $25 for that release. And then the release is taken to the tow company and they pay the tow and storage fee, and then the vehicle is released. No money is paid to parking, which is problematic. And I'll explain that in a few minutes. What is being proposed is that you can be towed if you now have 6 unpaid citations. If someone gets towed under this proposed code, the person is required to go to the police department, get a tow release, pay a $25 administrative fee. The tow company is notified to place a hold on that vehicle for the specified dollar amount owed. If it would be necessary for the person to pay over the phone any outstanding citations owed to the city of Bloomington or the collection agency. These receipts would then be provided to the tow company, meeting the specified dollar requirement. Any tow storage fee would also need to be paid for the vehicle to be released as stated in code. So as I was presenting this to the parking commission, of course, they did their due diligence and they had several questions for me. They asked for a report of how many individuals have 6 or more violations. So if I can present my screen, I'll share some data with you. Is it okay to present?
Yes, please do.
Okay, so this is a snapshot, like I said, from January 2020 to March 12th of 2021. Let me explain the data. I took out the individual's name, of course. The city was of interest and the state was of interest. Numbers of citations and the outstanding balance. So as you can see here, and I will scroll through these as quickly as I can. We have about 180 violators that have 6 or more parking citations since January of 2020. As you can see, 41 different states, a total of 1957 citations and about $48,000. You can see the big ones right here. And then I'm going to give you just a small example. So the example here, they have 6 unpaid citations, 6 times the $60. If they're over, of course, the 14 days is $360. They have not paid. So this person would be qualified, but this person would not because they paid on their individual citations. They don't have 5 outstanding, even 5 at $30, which is the average is $150. So this person might, depending on various reasonings, various incidents. So let me go ahead and move on. I was also asked by the Parking Commission what other cities like Bloomington that host IU have tow policies and what do they look like. So let me share that with you. I'm only going to go through a few. I researched 5 cities and 5 universities similar to Bloomington and IU. And so here's the first one. So on the IU campus, if you have 6 or more unpaid or paid citations within a fiscal year, you can be towed, and that's paid or unpaid. You have also If you are on the tow list 3 times in an academic year, then you get referred to the Dean of Students. West Lafayette, if someone has 2 or more unpaid citations or a total of $100 of unpaid fines, the vehicle will be booted. If they pay it, the boot release is $75 plus any of the unpaid citation or fines. If outstanding, if they do not claim the boot, then they are towed within 24 hours. In all these cases, all parking citations, boot fees, tow and storage fees must be paid to retrieve your vehicle. I also did Champaign, Madison, Wisconsin, Madison, University of Wisconsin, Ann Arbor, and you have University of Michigan. So if anybody is interested in that data for time's sake, I will not go through those, but I'll be glad to share it with anyone. So moving on, it was also requested in our last work session to show pictures of the violations that could be printed and placed on the cars under the windshield wipers. This would be a citation with a fine amount. So this is the 5th citation. We would know that by looking in the handheld how many citations they have outstanding. And then this is the warning, and this is the tow warning. So on the 5th citation, we will be giving them a warning. We don't currently do that. And then down here, see the tow warning flyer for more details. I also have made up a flyer. This is a draft of what that warning would look like. It tells them the immediate action is required, that we could tow on your next ticket. So it gives you the license plate, has 5 or more unpaid parking citations. If the vehicle is found in violation again, this vehicle will be cited and subject to tow at the owner's expense, which includes all fees owed to the city of Bloomington. It's going to be more like a Post-it note with an adhesive back, but then they can flip it over on the reverse and take the steps that can be taken to avoid being towed. I will also have I already have a placeholder for our parking website. I'll go through these real quickly. Next time you park, please avoid parking illegally so you won't be cited. Pay all citations by going to our website. That's available 24/7 with the link. Pay all citations over the phone with a credit card. That's at our parking office with dates and times and what credit cards we accept. If the citation is collection status, I put 2 numbers to our CRS, collections recovery. They also assist in setting up payment plans if needed, and there's the hours of operation. They are also available 24/7 online where you can go in and pay your account. If you're already on a payment plan, we just need to make sure that's in good standings and not in default status. If it is in default status, we ask that you bring it up to make it current. Sorry about that. And then the last 2 is if your citations are less than 14 days old, they can be appealed. And the city clerk's office administers that program. And there's a website connected to that, or they can pay one of the citations. And so the total number of outstanding citations can remain under 5. So they're not asked to pay all citations. We would prefer that they pay all citations, but we're only asking them to keep it under 5. So they will not get towed. And lastly, I think another protection for this type of process is that you have to have a supervisor approval to tow. So somebody in the parking enforcement with supervisor approval, which would be the manager and the team leader or myself, would have to take these steps. So when we give the warning, this will be denoted in our citation managed base system, and there'll be a picture of the 2 tickets on the windshield, and the flyer that you see here would be put on the driver's side window. So right when they go to the car, they know that they need to pay attention. And that's another reason why we put immediate action required. Please take action. We check to see if any of the citations are under appeal. Checked the collection agency by calling them to see if they're on a payment plan and they're not in default. And we check to see if we've received any recent payments from them. So that is a supervisor's responsibility. That is not an officer's responsibility. They would have to contact the supervisor for this approval. Our goal here is for education. Currently, that's not in process. There's no practice of warning people before they're towed. And I truly believe that by looking at the other institutions and other cities that do this, that this is a less punitive. It was 4 unpaid, and now we're moving it to 6. And that is my presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Wall. I appreciate your presentation. Could you return to the gallery view? Thank you. Are there council questions for Ms. Wall? Councilmember President Sims.
Thank you, Mr. Rallo. Thank you, Ms. Wall, for that presentation. The question I have is, what if a car owner happens to leave the jurisdiction without satisfying all the outstanding citations, which could be up to 5? What happens in that case?
So one thing we do is we do have a collection practice. So after 120 days, they're sent to collections, and that's the same collection. It's called capital recovery systems, the same one we use. They still move forward and try to collect that debt. They try to locate the person and try to collect the debt for us.
Okay, thank you. Chair Rallo, can I ask one more?
Please.
Well, actually, it's not a question. I'd really like to know, if the clerk is present, what's the clerk's office thoughts on this legislation?
We don't have any objections to the legislation overall. There may be some minor details in implementation that we can discuss with Ms. Wall afterward, depending on how it goes forward.
Okay, so you perceive no negative impact on appeals of citations, or will that be about the way it's always been from your perspective?
We may see a slight uptick in appeals, but I don't think it's going to be a huge spike. I don't think. I could be wrong.
Okay.
And if that's the case, I may come back to you and say, help. But, we'll see.
Thank you.
Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Thank you for the presentation and the extra data that you provided us, Ms. Wall. I just want to follow up on a few things that you said, just to make sure I understand. So in what case is a $10 replacement fee for a neighborhood permit charged?
A replacement fee is charged when they remove let's say they move and they go to a different zone, then they have to have a replacement permit. So that's probably the most popular one. Probably, and then if they change cars, let's say they change vehicles and they need a replacement. If they don't have the vehicle anymore, they don't have the permit, then if they can't bring it to us, then we charge a replacement fee.
So if somebody moved from one neighborhood residential parking zone to another, they would have to pay that $10 fee. There's not a transferability of that permit.
There is transferability if they have the permit. So they bring us the permit, but unfortunately, if for any reason they lose the permit, or I have to say it, some people share the permit, which they're not to, but if it's a visitor permit, it has to stay there, and then they would have to pay a fee. Yes.
Thank you.
Further council questions? Councilmember Scambilleri.
Yes, thank you. Ms. Wall, thank you for outlining all this for us. Just out of curiosity, could you give us a sense, either numerically or in terms of percentage, of how many of those who have violations rely on a payment plan with us?
So the city of Bloomington does not do a payment plan. However, the collection agency does the payment plan.
And do we have a sense of how many have a payment plan with the collections agency?
Nope, but I'd be glad to get you that information. Our collection they shared with me last week was about 40.5%, which is very parking.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councilmember Rosenberger.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Wall, for that presentation. Okay, so if somebody has 6 tickets, they can't get their car back until they are under 6, is what you're saying. It's like 5 tickets.
Thank you. They would have to pay, we want them to pay before they get to that 5th or 4th unpaid violation. To get their car back, they have to pay all fees if they get towed on that 6th violation.
What if they, okay. So they could have like 10 tickets and get towed, and then they would have to pay all 10 tickets.
As long as they have a warning, this proposes a warning. So they have to be warned before we tow them. So they will have an opportunity based on the flyer that I showed to do all those things. If they're not warned, they won't get towed. If they're not on a payment plan with the collection agency, if they are, they will not be towed unless they're in default of that payment plan. There's multiple steps on that flyer, and I can show the flyer again, that have to be taken to not get towed on that 6th violation. We're trying to educate them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And if they get towed after the warnings and they're not in a payment plan, can they get on a payment plan to get their car back?
To get their car back from the tow company?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Yes. They would have to pay everything.
They have to pay everything. Yes.
I mean, what happens if they can't pay it?
They have what I shown on the flyer. There's multiple things they can do to get there. If they can't pay it at that time, then their car will remain in storage until they can pay.
And the city would just keep their car for potentially like years.
The city won't, the tow company would.
Okay. Thank you.
Further questions from council? Councilmember Flaherty.
Yeah, I share some concern, I think, over that kind of line of questioning. I don't recall offhand, after our early 2020 discussions of towing in detail, exactly like what a daily storage fee looks like. But I'm just, despite all the warnings and despite the opportunities to pay before getting to 6, I can imagine someone being towed, owing $1,000 or $500, not being able to pay it. And as they work on it, they're just accruing more and more debt every day as their car is in storage at a tow company. And since payment plans since things don't go to collections until 120 days later, that's obviously a very long time before they'd have the option for a payment plan. I mean, it seems like it'll be relatively few in number, the people that fall into this kind of really difficult situation, but I imagine it will happen. And I'm wondering what staff, in discussions with the Parking Commission and just internally with staff as you develop this, was that situation discussed at all? And have any ideas been workshopped about how to address it? Whether a payment plan, directly from that the city offers, or some other mechanism to avoid that type of situation where somebody gets stuck in their cars in storage and they can't get it back?
If they would like to reach out, our whole goal is for them to reach out prior to that. We understand some individuals won't, and some individuals cannot pay. But I believe that if they reach out, and we did talk about it in Parking Commission, our hopes is with this program that we educate them in advance. But if they would reach out and ask for assistance, we would try to provide them the best guidance we can. If that is a payment plan, that would be something that would have to go through the controller's office. And I don't have a problem talking to the controller's office about that. But by the time that they get so far, my goal is to not get them that far. But if they get that far and they need to talk to someone, there's the appeals process, but there's also, talking to me and talking to the enforcement manager to see if there's anything that we can do.
Thank you. I do have a follow-up if that's okay, Chair Rollo.
Please.
Related question on people who are kind of over 6 tickets already, and we begin implementation of this. If you get your let's say you have 8 right now, when you get your 9th ticket, will you still get this sort of warning phase-in period, or will you be immediately subject to?
Absolutely.
Okay.
You have to have a warning, and then you have to be given that flyer with the steps that they take to prevent being towed the next time you're found in violation.
Okay, thank you.
Not to be in violation, but in violation.
Yes, thank you.
Further council questions? Councilmember Piedmont Smith. Well, let's go to Councilmember Volin first, and then we'll come back to you, Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
She raised her hand first.
Yes, but she already took a...
Oh, okay. Ms. Wall, as you know, I've already familiar with this from this discussion of the Parking Commission, but the questions asked now make me lead to the question, perhaps there could be some educating being done before the 5th ticket. In other words, is there any kind of printed material that talks about, towing at 6 tickets? Can there be some kind of printed material either on the cover of the ticket or on the ticket itself, saying, towing happens after 6 tickets, read more at this website?
Absolutely.
There can be, or you already are doing it?
This is a work in progress, and it's for an education. So I would say, yeah, that would be a great idea, Steve.
Great, thank you.
Okay, before we proceed to second round questions, let me just address the public that have arrived since we began our meeting. We're discussing right now, or actually in council questions regarding ticketing towing ordinance 2126. And if you're here for the UDO ordinance, that will be coming up next in a few minutes. So Councilmember Piedmont Smith, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you. So I'm just trying to understand all the changes compared with what happens now. So Ms. Wall, you described that currently if a vehicle is towed, the person goes to the police, pays $25, and then can retrieve their vehicle from the towing company without any additional fees. Is that right?
No, they have to pay the towing company fees, but they do not pay parking fees, any of the citations. So as I stated before, this is problematic because they will leave and they'll go park in the same place. And then we wait the designated time and then we can tow again. But they continue to accumulate several citations by doing it that way.
Okay, so the change is that under the new ordinance, they would have to pay their citations in addition to the towing fees.
That is correct.
All right, thank you.
Clerk Bolden, do you have a question?
I don't have a question, but I thought I might add a little bit of clarity for some of the council members, because I thought maybe just a little bit of clarification. I'm not sure exactly how to phrase this, but people don't get tickets like back to back to back on a regular basis. So I got the sense that you were concerned that people are getting a lot of tickets and they would be unable to pay them because they just had tickets mounting up, and then they would get the storage fees for their vehicles as well. And that's not very common at all. You may get somebody who gets 1 or 2 tickets or even 3, but usually when they get those tickets, on the tickets themselves, it's listed on how to pay the ticket or how to appeal the ticket. And they usually do follow up fairly quickly, and they'll come in and they come to the clerk's office, or over the last year, they've called or emailed the clerk's office and said, hey, I got this ticket, something's wrong, how do I fix it, or everything else. So they will reach out frequently. And for all the tickets that are issued, that's, roughly 10%, maybe 9% of all the tickets that are issued where people will say, I think a mistake has been made. So people will reach out. So it's rare that you get to the point where you have those tickets where you get more than 3 tickets that are issued for the same issue so we try to educate people on a regular basis. So you're talking about a small subset of tickets, and then an even smaller subset of tickets where you get multiples of them, and then an even smaller subset where they stack up to the point of getting to the towing section. So I thought it might be helpful if you knew that you're really talking about a very small group of number of all the tickets that are issued in the city. Just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you. That's a very, very useful, helpful clarification. Are there any other questions from council on Ordinance 2126? Seeing none, we'll go to the public. Oh, sorry, Councilmember.
Yes, thank you. I'm struck by, I think it was Councilmember Flaherty's question about people who have tickets that would qualify them for towing if this ordinance had already passed. One element of this ordinance states that it shall be in effect after it's passed by Common Council and approved by the mayor. Any required publication as necessary, other promulgation in accordance with the law. Is that sufficient? Do you feel like we need more of an on-ramp or more time to educate about this shift?
I believe the education that we can give them would be, as Steve mentioned, on the actual notice or the citation. I can put up anything on our website, so I do have the authority to do that. Education-wise, I will take any ideas that have worked in the past. I'll be glad to work with the mayor's office to even have a parking 101 education site established so they understand about this new rule.
But, and I appreciate that, but do you feel like you need more time? Or do you feel like this will just unfold kind of organically? You're muted.
I think it will unfold. It won't. I'm sorry about that. I think it will unfold organically as we move through the process, and as people get warnings, they're going to call us. Because as Ms. Bolden said, I mean, they're concerned. It's just the people that have ignored, unfortunately, the citations and are in a point where they're like, can you help us? That's how we're going to get their, I think that's how we're going to get their attention, by educating them with that acknowledgement of you must do something, act now. I think that would be sufficient. I don't think we need any time.
Got it. Thank you.
Anyone else? Any other council questions? Okay, seeing none, Mr. Lucas, we'll go to public comment. If anyone in the public would like to comment on the ticketing and towing ordinance that's been presented, this is Ordinance 2126. Please indicate by a raised hand function on Zoom, and meeting host, Mr. Lucas, will allow you to speak.
Yes, and first I had a request from Michael Horsley, who should now be able to comment.
Mr. Horsley.
Hi, yeah, thank you. Just out of a curiosity, and I don't know if you're going to have the statistics on this question on hand, but of that small percentage of people who are, getting multiple tickets, do they also happen to fall into the 36.6% poverty rate that the city currently is experiencing? And how do you propose to get the money from people who obviously cannot afford it?
Thank you, Mr. Horsley. Is there further council or public comments? Mr. Lucas?
Yes, next up is Stephen Lehman, who should be able to unmute.
Mr. Lehman.
Yes, this is not a comment, it's a question. I'm just wondering how long the tow companies can keep a car in storage, mounting up fees and everything before they're allowed to sell that car.
Thank you for your question. It might be addressed by further council questions.
Thank you.
Mr. Lucas, anyone else?
Yes, I see Greg Rago, who should be able to unmute.
Mr. Rago.
Yeah, you got me? This
yes.
is Greg Rago. Yeah, I just have a couple of questions for Ms. Wall. Appreciate your time. Is there data available on where these violating vehicles are registered, which county they're from, number one? And the second question would be, is there a map of the city where these violations occur? If there is that data available somewhere on the website here, I didn't see it. So that's all, just two questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rago. I think that Ms. Wall did display the origin, the county origin of the driver, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
But we'll follow up with exploring that second part.
Thank you.
Good question. Mr. Lucas?
Yes, I also see a request for comment from Jean Len, who should be able to unmute.
Hello, this is Jean Lennon. I just wanted to make a brief comment that I'm concerned about even a few people racking up storage fees. From personal example, a situation like this would have put one of my friends at risk for homelessness when she couldn't afford to get her vehicle that she needed to get to her job. I ended up in that case helping her with that situation. And I think even if it's a few people, I think you should be careful about that. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Lennon, for your comment.
I don't see any additional requests at the moment. I will remind folks, and I know we've got a lot of folks here to comment on the next item, to use the raise hand function, you can click, it may depend on the type of device you're on, either the reactions button in your control panel. Some folks may need to click the participants button and then find the raise hand function on that sidebar that pops up. And if all of that fails and you still can't find the raise hand function, simply type a message into the chat and send that to the meeting host, and we'll get you down on the list that way. But I don't see anyone else at the moment for this particular item.
Thank you, Mr. Lucas. Okay, we'll return now to council for final comments or further questions. Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, I wanted to follow up on Mr. Lehman's question. How long can a tow company keep a car in storage before they can sell it? Is that something that Ms. Wall might be able to answer?
I'm going to refer to Rayanne Cox if she's available. She's an enforcement manager.
Thank you.
Huh?
I do not have the information, but I will get it to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further council questions? I think these are excellent questions from the public this evening. I think that we'll probably follow up before our regular session meeting on May 5th, where we'll hear this again to find out more details. Ms. Wall, thank you for your presentation this evening and answering questions. Is there a do pass recommendation?
Move to pass.
Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
I had a comment. We have comments yet?
Oh, very sorry. Please.
Sorry, I know we're all eager to get to the video, but I am concerned about the issue that Councilmember Flaherty and Jean Lennon raised about individuals who get themselves into trouble. We all have done it in our lifetimes, and rack up a lot of fees that they just simply cannot pay, and then lose the use of their car, which many people need for work, and then really have no recourse. So I'm going to be passing tonight and reaching out to Ms. Wall and Ms. Cox to see if there might be some appeal process in such cases where it's just clear that the increased storage fees is just digging a person deeper into a hole that they cannot get out of. So I would like to explore that before next week. Thank you.
Thank you. And I apologize. I meant to say council questions and comments, and I think Councilmember Flaherty was next, and then Rosenbarger.
Yeah, thank you again, Ms. Wall, for the presentation, and also Clerk Bolden for adding some insight as well. And I appreciate the notes that kind of the situation that Councilmember Piedmont Smith was just talking about is pretty rare, and I think will hopefully be even more rare with this kind of additional education step and that sort of thing. Even so, it can and probably will happen, and yeah, I'm uncomfortable with the current ordinance, specifically the potential for someone to have several $100s or more of fines and lose access to their car and potentially be incurring more debt without. I think there's a reasonableness approach that I think Ms. Wall was kind of trying to speak to, that we would probably try to work with them in some way. But I feel like that probably just needs to be codified. So I'll be voting no on the do pass recommendation tonight, but I'm happy to work collaboratively with staff or other council members to address that small gap, but important gap. So appreciate all the work that went into all the other portions, and thank you.
Councilmember Rosenberger.
Thank you. I am going to abstain tonight just for the same reason Councilmember Piedmont Smith stated. I think it'll be good just to work on, some kind of payment plan for the folks who have too many tickets and can't pay them, just so we don't get into situations like Ms. Jean Lynn talked about. Thank you.
Councilmember Volin.
Yeah, I recognize the concern that's been brought up by members of the public and by several of my colleagues tonight. And I share it. That shouldn't be, I still am going to vote for this ordinance. Now, that's partly because I had some help in advising on it on the Parking Commission. But I think it's important to note that, the mere presence of Ms. Wall tonight, this is the first time we've ever had a coherent parking department and somebody or a division rather of Public Works, but somebody coherently directing and managing parking policy. And this is one of the first significant amendations to parking policy. We're going to have hiccups and growing pains. So I'm confident that by next week we can work out some kind of policy that makes it clear that we don't want to penalize people who are, in poverty, but we do want to make sure that that our parking rules are enforced. So I'm confident that Ms. Wall will be able to work with those concerns and have something for us by next week. So, but it's a legitimate concern that I share. Thank you.
Any other comments from council? Okay, seeing none, we had a recommendation and a second, I believe. I'll begin as I see my council members on the screen. Or is it appropriate to call the clerk to call the roll? Our parliamentarian?
Most typically in committee meetings, the chair kind of just goes down the list, but really up to you.
Yes. Councilmember Scambaluri.
Yes.
Councilmember Flaherty.
No.
Council President Sims.
Yes.
Council Member Piedmont Smith.
Pass.
Council Member Volin.
Yes.
Was that a pass or a yes, Council Member Piedmont Smith?
It was a pass.
Pass, sorry. Council Member Rosenbarger.
Abstain.
Council Member Sandberg.
Yes.
Council Member Smith.
Yes.
And I will abstain. So I believe that is a 4-1 to 4 recommendation this evening. Thank you, Ms. Wall, for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now move on to Ordinance 2123. And for those who arrived late, I mentioned that it's unlikely that we'll finish our committee deliberations on this topic this evening. And so I recommended that we have a motion at midnight to recess until for a future meeting. And Council President Sims, Council leadership has reached some determination on future scheduling. Would you like to address that?
I will. Thank you, Chairman Rollo. As president, I would like to call and schedule a special session for May 4th, 2021 at 6:30 p.m. to consider consideration of Ordinance 21-23 and Ordinance 21-24 as necessary. This special session may be continued on May 5th, 2021, following the Council's normal regular session that evening, and also on May 6th, 2021, so that the continued deliberations on the UDO ordinances can occur over a series of special sessions and what will be one continuous meeting. As such, until the deliberations come to a close, the Council will recess and not adjourn at the end of each of these meetings. If by May 6th, the Council needs additional time to consider these items, additional dates for the continuation of the special session can be scheduled either by the Council or the President. Thank you.
Thank you, President Sims. Councilmember Volin, did you have a question?
I had a question for Mr. Lucas. What would be the appropriate motion at a later point in this meeting? Would it be, I mean, Mr. President, President Sims said that it would be a special session, but the Committee of the Whole cannot extend itself. It has to rise and report. By recessing, will we not be continuing the Committee of the Whole onto a later date?
I think the intent would be that if tonight's Committee of the Whole does not make a recommendation, that the two items related to the UDO wouldn't return to the Committee of the Whole. They would simply be taken up by the full Council in special sessions starting May the 4th.
So is then the motion tonight would be to rise and report, not to take a vote, a recommendation on a recommendation. Is that correct?
Correct. If the committee tonight does not reach a recommendation before the end of the meeting, or wishes to end the meeting before it reaches a recommendation, the appropriate motion would be to rise and report. And as President Sims just announced, the time to report to the full Council could be at a special session, May the 4th.
So recess is not in order here. Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that clarification. Councilmember Rosenberger.
Thank you. I was just going to ask if it's possible that we ask people to not raise their hands early, or if we can like possibly put them down. It just gets to the point where we can't see faces on our screen anymore. It's a minor consideration.
And just as a housekeeping matter for council members or staff members who are on screen and need to keep their screens cleared, you should be able to disable or to hide any non-video participants. I know we've got close to 260 folks on the meeting, so you can send me a chat if you need help with that. Any
other questions to clarify? Okay, before we proceed, I'd like to propose a certain structure of this meeting tonight for deliberations and debate, and that is to have staff report on Ordinance 2123 for 20 minutes, and then have 20 minutes of council questions following that, and then entertain amendments, allow 15 minutes for the presentation of the First Amendment, and then followed by 15 minutes of council questions before we go to the public on that topic for a 3-minute comment period per member of the public. So without objection, I'd like to begin. I see Ms. Scanlon is present.
I am. Hello.
Ms. Scanlon, would you like to begin? And I believe Mr. Lucas will be keeping time this evening.
I don't know. Yeah. Is that if I go ahead? Okay, if I go ahead?
Yes, please do.
Great. And
we're ready.
Great. 20 or 25. So I will try to squeeze this in. Hopefully I won't go that long. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jackie Scanlon. I'm the Development Services Manager for the Planning and Transportation Department. And what we are here to discuss tonight is Ordinance 2123, which is related to the uses duplex, triplex, and fourplex in the Unified Development Ordinance, which is our zoning code. So that petition was heard by Plan Commission as ZO 0921 at 3 meetings at the end of March and beginning of April of this year. They voted to send the petition forward that we all discussed tonight with a vote of 6-3 and added 2 amendments to the petition that was brought forward by staff. So the proposal from Plan Commission, as you can see here, is to allow duplexes as a permitted use in the R1, R2, R3, and R4 residential districts. Those are our primarily single-family zoning districts, and to allow triplexes in the R4 district as a conditional use. The proposal also includes a proposal to amend the use-specific standards related to the 3 uses that I mentioned, duplex, triplex, and fourplex. So you can see here on the left, this is what is in the zoning code now. This is what came out of council last time. This discussion was had in 2019 for the April 2020 Unified Development Ordinance, which was an entire repeal and replace of the code. This was a portion, discussed as a portion of that update. And what came out of that discussion was what you see here, which is duplexes as conditional in the RE zoning district and duplexes and triplexes as permitted with use specific standards. That's what the asterisk denotes in the R4 zoning district. You can also see that currently there are asterisks in for both uses in R1 through R3. That is not something that is, we're not able to administer that the way the code is written. That's actually something that has to be removed, or permitted, conditional, accessory, or temporary has to be added to those boxes. And so what is coming forward to you tonight from Plan Commission is what is on the right, which is duplex dwelling permitted, again with use specific standards in the R1, R2, R3, and R4 zoning districts, and triplex as conditional in the R4 with use specific standards. So again, just as a separate those out a little bit, duplex only is the only use that's being permitted in, or being proposed as permitted in the R1, R2, and R3, also permitted in R4, and then triplex from permitted in the current code to conditional in R4. So as I mentioned, there are use specific standards changes. So use specific standards run with a use and they have to be met even if the use is listed as permitted. So they are enforced whether or not the use is listed as permitted or conditional. We have existing use specific standards in the code. some left in, or those that were put in again in the 2019 full repeal and replace. Currently, we as a staff proposed, and then Plan Commission is also recommending to amend those use specific standards. Some are being proposed to be removed. For the duplex use specific standards, we're proposing to remove the provision. There was a provision related to previous zoning district designations, and remove provisions attempting to regulate the size of the structure based on whether or not a demolition permit had been recently issued. Those again are convoluted and not easy to understand for the public, and also very difficult to administer. As we're proposing to remove those, remove the requirement for 2 street-facing doors on all duplexes, and removing a 40-foot width maximum provision. We are proposing to add a provision that the owner or registered agent for a property cannot have a violation on file, violation of the UDO on file with our department for a period of 3 years prior to application for the duplex, and adding a provision related to the street-facing doors, indicating that any new duplexes will have to have the 2 street-facing doors, but allowing for remodels and conversions by also allowing for a minimum of 1 on existing structures. And then 4 provisions remain related to the design of the structure. You can see those here, having to do with roof pitch. Oh, I'm sorry, 3 remain related to design. 1 is that the elements of your building have to be similar in general shape, size, and design to the majority of your existing single family and duplex structures on your block face. Those are related to roof pitch, front porch width and depth, front building setback, and vehicle parking access. We also limited the number of total bedrooms to 6, and that they each have to have their own separate utility meters. And then the 4th provision that remains is that each side is subject to the definition of family. So for triplex and fourplex, we have a similar removal of the provisions related to a previous code and provisions related to a potential demolition permit and the 40-foot width maximum. And we added in a provision about the notice of violation, as well as a provision related to front door, that you can have 1 to 2 front doors facing the road in either triplex or fourplex. And then you can see here, those same design use specific standards were left in related to roof pitch, front porch width and depth, et cetera. And also the maximum number of bedrooms, which is 3 per side, 3 per unit, excuse me, and they each have to have separate utility meters. And also the definition of family. So this was previously a conditional use, and there are 10 other criteria that need to be met, and that was taken out for duplexes by the Plan Commission, but is still part of the proposal for triplexes. So you can see those here, and these are the provisions that the Board of Zoning Appeals would be taking into consideration, along with, of course, requiring that the use-specific standards be met. So existing conditions in Bloomington, why are we making this proposal? We have a Bloomington housing study that was done after the last time this was brought forward to council, and something that was discussed in the comprehensive plan and then reinforced by that housing study, first by a regional housing study and then by a Bloomington specific housing study, is that we need more housing. We as the administration and separate departments are proposing multiple tools to address that basic need. The zoning code, of course, is one tool, and we are proposing different layers just in the zoning code, including our mixed use student housing district, which you will see mapped in the 21-24 ordinance that will be discussed at a later date. We created that district in order to have an area where student housing focused development could be simplified and encouraged in certain locations. we have changed the regulations for ADUs since the original approval, and then the last iteration, and then even with the ordinances that were seen earlier this month, which were made by right in April 2020, and again, then some more additional changes to help those along just this month. And then we also, of course, will be encouraging and working with property owners for development of housing in underdeveloped or undeveloped areas as well. For example, the old hospital site, we have recently a new PUD on a large vacant lot north of 17th Street that's being developed. And of course, we have old PUDs in the southwest portion of town that are also being developed. The purpose of this petition is to expand living choice for households. We're trying to increase options where more people are able to live in areas that are easier to get places by foot, bike, or bus, to discourage sprawl. If we don't allow development in town, we can only continue to move out, increasing our car dependence, which is in direct opposition to many of our stated city goals, including many in the comprehensive plan. We see sprawl for many reasons, one of which is running out of land that is available for development in town because it has been set aside for few uses. So I will briefly go through some of these here. You can see this was in the staff report as well. We see our owner-occupied renter mix at 35-65. We hear that quite a bit. That has been the same since at least the 2000 decennial census, 5 years after the 1995 zoning code update, which we know and have heard at these meetings and seen in those minutes was intended to downzone the areas immediately adjacent to town for single family use. And those numbers aren't changing, haven't changed in some time. They are obviously, of course, accurate, but it's kind of it's not quite equivalent to say that allowing the opportunity for duplexes will necessarily increase rentals. Both sides of a duplex can be owned. If we are trying to increase opportunity for owner occupancy, then allowing 2 units on one lot does that. If we are just trying to decrease the opportunity for rental, then not allowing 2 units on one lot does that. We often hear that we are trying to increase the opportunity for owner occupancy, and so that is what we are trying to do with this proposal. Okay, so a little bit more about existing conditions. I might pick up speed here. We have a number of local historic districts. And you can see those outlined here in black. In those areas, nothing can be demolished or in many cases even changed physically on the outside without approval from the Bloomington Historic Preservation Commission. And each district has their own guidelines and those have to be met. Outside of those local districts, we also have our demolition delay rule, which is located in the zoning code. It is based on a survey done by Bloomington Restorations Incorporated. Because in response to a survey that the state does on a rolling basis. And basically all properties in the city have been identified. Those that are listed as contributing or greater go through some measure of demolition delay if they are being requested to be demolished. And again, Bloomington Historic Preservation Commission sees those. Those rules are not as strict, but if a property was notable or outstanding, they could make recommendation for designation to this council, and this council could designate those properties that they see fit. And then for demolition of other properties not listed either as a local district or in the demolition delay ordinance, those properties can be demolished through simply going through the building permit process with Monroe County Building Department. So there are kind of 3 levels there related to demolition. One thing we have heard a few times related to existing conditions is that the concern that if plexes are allowed, they'll be built quickly and they'll overrun our existing primarily single family areas. We wanted to see, we were trying to think, do we have existing areas that maybe are under those pressures now, where existing plexes are currently allowed by right? So we looked at existing single family lots in our multifamily residential, high density multifamily residential, mixed use corridor, and mixed use medium scale zoning districts. You can see those outlined here in black, and you can see some street names and other things identifying how zoomed in this map is. And there are, at its most conservative count, 178 existing single family lots in those districts. Those lots, you can see them here on this map. They're not, out at the fringes of town, away from the neighborhoods. They are, they are near Hillside. They are along Walnut. They are at 2nd Street, going west and 3rd. They are in the north downtown. So they are in areas that are very similar to some of the historic neighborhoods, and in some cases are located in them. Those lots are not receiving we have not received any requests for duplex conversions, tear downs of any kind for any of those homes. Since the new code has been enacted, we haven't even received any planning of the day inquiries about having that be done. So we think that while obviously a small sample, does point to what we've been trying to say, which we think that that the process, were plexes to be allowed, duplexes in some of these areas, that would be a slow change, similar to what we've seen with the accessory dwelling units, which we have seen 20 requests for those in the last, I believe it's been 4 years since those were first discussed. And another topic here for existing conditions, existing plex locations, we looked through existing hand rental data, other city addressing data, as well as county assessor data, and found, again, at a conservative count, 706 existing plexes. We think it's useful to point this number out. Everyone knows well, maybe they don't. Most people know there are plexes in town. But one thing that I think is missed sometimes is that if we were to legitimize plexes in the zoning code, we would be legitimizing these properties and allowing these existing properties to do upgrades and expansions that they can't do now. They're lawful non-conforming. They can't convert a closet into part of a bedroom. They can't make a hallway smaller. They can't, change a back porch into living space. They are quite restricted and in ways that our single family homes aren't, and other lawful uses, and allowing this change would change that for those properties as well. A little bit of rental data. We have, because again, while the discussion about plexes should not only be about rentals, it is something that comes up a lot. And so we wanted to give some information about existing rentals in the areas that we hear most worry about in the existing RE, R2, and R3 districts. We have a little under 3,000 existing rental addresses and about 3,600 units. Of those properties, 51% of the total active rental addresses in those districts are owned by someone who has a Bloomington address and owns 1 to 5 rentals. So just over 50% of the rentals in all of our primarily single family neighborhoods are owned by people who identify as Bloomington residents and own 5 or less rentals. When we hear, and I'm sure that you saw this in your packet, from members of the public, when we have been hearing from them, many of them own rentals. We hear a lot about out-of-town developers and being worried about large groups. But what the numbers show is that a lot of the rentals that we have in town are owned by people who are here. So 51% being people who own 5 or less. And that number for units jumps to 67% if you just include everyone who has an owner as a Bloomington address. So that includes obviously our larger groups. So a third of our properties that are rentals in these primarily single family neighborhoods are owned by someone who lives out of town, but 2/3 are owned by people who live here. The numbers show that the people who are buying and converting and running rentals in town are people who live in Bloomington. Another issue, one issue that we're trying to address, or an issue that we think can be addressed by adding duplexes, is still allowing the possibility for single family as much as it is allowed now. Single family is by far the most most protected and encouraged use in our zoning code. As I mentioned, 51%, oh, actually I haven't mentioned these yet, I'm sorry. 51% of our publicly available land, that's non-institutional land, so not owned basically by IU or the city, is zoned for single family. And not, oh, a single family can go there, that only a single family can go there. That's land. 73% of those parcels are only allowed to have single family uses on them. So when we talk about wanting to be able to invite more people into the community and, having a home ownership, when our parcels already exist and they have one home on them, they are unavailable for that. And that's 73% of the area that we have is limited in that way. And then I will note here as well, you can see it in the chart, but it's also on the left. We have 18 zoning districts. Single family uses are allowed in 14 of those. The only ones in which they're not allowed are parks, employment, medical, and institutional. That's not right, downtown and institutional. No changes are proposed to that. So single family uses that exist, or those who want to build single family into the future in any of the areas where it is allowed, still can do that. We are just asking to add another option to the code in the form of plexes. So again, here's a map you can see. I believe this one, Ryan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is the by land, single family zoning. So the comprehensive plan has a number of goals that talk about things I've been mentioning, lack of, we are trying to decrease sprawl. We're trying to encourage people to use other forms of travel as opposed to vehicle. We want to use smart growth strategies for development and redevelopment, and that is what we believe this proposal is doing. Another option to provide equitable access to housing. We've heard a lot that this is not affordable housing. It is not affordable housing. We've not said that. This is an opportunity to potentially affect housing affordability and allow more units to be built in this town so that the overall units could possibly come down. We haven't made changes to our zoning, and we've had those restrictions on areas where only single family is allowed for so long, and it's not working. We aren't able to affect those numbers and create more housing. And so we're hoping that with this puzzle piece, along with the other ones I mentioned at the beginning, that we can start to have a positive effect. We are growing. We'd like to meet population growth, again, increasing opportunities for housing, ensuring a full mix of housing at different price points, and a range of diverse housing types in downtown and adjoining areas. Basically, we do think that this goal, proposal does support the comprehensive plan. We understand that there are some conflicting specific goals in the plan, and this might be a discussion later for the map, but we have pulled back those areas where we're asking for more unit plexes, so triplexes and fours, to kind of the edges of neighborhoods, but we don't think that duplexes are a high density use that should be relegated to those areas. And again, welcoming different types of people to the community and making opportunities for more people to be able to live in areas that we as a community have already determined are positive and offer things to the residents who get to live there. And this is the one I'm sure that we will hear about, avoid placing high density forms in single family neighborhoods. Again, duplexes, adding an extra unit, it's the same as accessory dwelling units as far as the number of units on a lot, which we as a community and this council have already determined is appropriate. And we think duplexes are appropriate as well.
Ms. Scanlon, I believe we're at 23 minutes. Am I over?
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Go ahead,
okay,
finish up. It looks like you're nearly done.
I am, I think. Okay, thank you. So basically, just to wrap up here, thank you for letting me prattle on. I would like to say, you know, this is, it is a change. We do think it's incremental. It's something we see, you know, we were asked to look at other college towns like Lafayette, Iowa City, Champaign, Urbana, Madison. They all have districts that allow plexes with single family. That's not something we have. We do think the comprehensive plan supports it. We think it's a citywide solution by allowing them all over town and that there is a demonstrated need. The Plan Commission, as I mentioned, approved 2 amendments. They changed duplex to permitted in the R1 through R4, and they removed the 150 buffer and time limit provision for duplexes in R1 through R3. And I can answer any questions. As I said, they voted 6-3 at their April 1st hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Scanlon, for that report. I just want to correct, Clerk Bolden has indicated that Ordinance 2126 received a 513 recommendation. That was the ticketing and towing ordinance. I miscounted. So now we'll go to council questions. And we'll begin with Councilmember Volin, and we'll spend about 20 minutes on questions.
Thank you. A brief question, Ms. Scanlon. Did you say that that a duplex has to look like other duplexes on a block or just like other buildings on the block?
The code says other single family and duplexes on that block face.
Okay, that was just a little point that I had missed. So
sure.
Any duplex would have to be built in substantially the same way as other houses on the block.
They have to emulate design in those 4 ways, including roof pitch and porch width, parking access, and I believe there's 1 more.
Very good, thank you.
Further questions from council? Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, Ms. Scanlon. Appreciate your presentation. So does this mean that duplexes can have 6 bedrooms?
Each side of the duplex can have 3 under the current proposal, yes.
Right, so that's correct. And so does this also allow for each bedroom to be rented individually?
The zoning code cannot regulate who homes can be rented to.
So the likelihood of it being owner occupied is honestly very low.
I don't know how that's related, but yeah, no, we don't think so. We in 2019, when we looked at the Plex data, we saw that some were owner occupied. Yeah, we do think that it's an opportunity to increase owner occupancy in the community.
Thank you, Ms. Scanlon.
Further council questions? Councilmember Scambaluri.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have some questions that relate to conditional versus permitted. Would you rather I held those until we got to amendments, or would you rather start now?
Well, if you think it's relevant, I believe Ms. Scanlon probably is well-versed, so perhaps you could answer the question.
I would imagine. Ms. Scanlon, I believe you are. So if you want to just hear the question, then postpone it till later, that's fine. But it's been a very pivotal question for me in this entire discussion. So much has centered on permitted versus conditional versus prohibited. And a question that I'm still not crystal clear on is what exactly conditional means and the degree to which it actually is something of a speed bump in this process. Could you talk about that?
Sure.
What exactly is the role of the Board of Zoning Appeals? What exactly are they obligated to do? What are they not obligated to do? So could you dive in?
Okay. So I'm just going to throw this back up. This is the conditional use criteria. I'm glad you asked this question. We know that there has been some misinformation being given out at some kind of public presentations. The role of the Board of Zoning Appeals is to look at a petition for conditional use and see if it meets these criteria. We have simplified the first four here: compliance with UDO, compliance with other applicable regulations, utility service improvement standards, and prior approvals. But basically that whatever your conditional use is, that you are meeting all of the development standards and use standards in the code. There are no questions with that. And that you are meeting any other applicable environmental standards or utility standards. And so if you're not, then they're not going to approve, they cannot approve your conditional use. And then the sixth below, consistency with the comprehensive plan, other applicable plans, for example, the transportation plan, providing adequate public service and facilities. Again, these apply to all conditional uses. So to boil them down for plexes, some of these may seem too broad because you may not be providing much of a large development that would need to provide public services. But number 3 is the one probably with the most meat in it that related to some of the concerns that we have heard, shall not result in excessive destruction, loss, or damage of natural, scenic, or historic features of significant importance, that they shall not cause significant adverse impacts on surrounding properties with a list of reasons, a list of types of nuisance, hours of operation are normal, and that the petitioner will make a good faith effort to address concerns of adjoining property owners in the immediate neighborhood as defined in the pre-submittal neighborhood meeting. So basically at the Board of Zoning Appeals, the petitioner is making a request and indicating that they believe they meet all the use specific standards. And then staff and the petitioner can also list all 10 of these criteria and propose findings. Staff will also propose findings. If we think that they're meeting all 10 criteria, we will recommend approval. And the Board of Zoning Appeals will have to decide whether or not they agree with us. If things come to light at that hearing that indicate that they do not meet those 10 criteria, then the Board of Zoning Appeals can certainly deny a request or ask for more time if it's something that can be met. When something is permitted, these 10 criteria are no longer applicable. So the only things that would be being looked at for a duplex, for example, listed as permitted would be those things listed under the use specific standards. And if they can meet those items, as well as our general development standards like setbacks and impervious surface coverage, then we would have to approve the permit. And there is no discretion there for staff. Does that help answer the question?
Yeah, that helps. In the slide you just had up, you also had a section that whoever is seeking to develop the property must make a good faith effort to address the concerns of nearby neighbors.
Yes.
That good faith effort is a very subjective thing. What's enough of a good faith effort? How have you seen the BZA interpret that in the past?
Well, that has only been in since council put that in last year. So we have not seen it used much, honestly. And actually, anyone else can chime in if you can think of a conditional use that was used on, but I do not believe that I can recall one off the top of my head. I can look into that for you. But yes, it was put in, I believe, I'd have to go back and read the minutes, as kind of a nod to giving deference or importance to those neighborhood association meetings that often occur before things appear at Board of Zoning Appeals.
That's helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Additional questions? I need to see you all. Councilmember Flaherty, I believe, is next.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, Ms. Scanlon. In the conditional use process, sorry, I know that's actually not in the proposal, but we just discussed it and I had a follow-up, which is wondering about if there's neighborhoods that don't have associations, what would constitute a neighborhood meeting and just sort of how that would work procedurally?
That's a good question. I believe code specifically, well, I'd have to check on that. For example, in the PUD section, code specifically indicates that only if you have a neighborhood association, within a certain distance of your request. But yeah, let me check on that. I'm not positive what the language is on that.
No problem. Thanks.
Further questions? Councilmember Volin. You're muted, Councilmember Volin.
There we go. Part of the administration's overall effort in developing the new UDO has been, I mean, I was quite against the idea of a mixed-use student housing type, but it's been approved, and has been a lot of housing being built for that purpose. How many units, roughly, of new multifamily dwellings that are, for lack of a better phrase, intended for student housing have been built since the UDO, or are approved to be built since the UDO was approved?
Since last year?
I mean, well, yeah, like coming online within the next few years are already open.
That's a good question. Let me see here. Hold on.
There's been a lot built in 16 and 18.
Oh, sorry. Say that again.
There was a lot built in 16 and 18, according to the 2020 Bloomington housing study.
Yeah, we have, I can give you those numbers. The numbers that I have aren't broken down by those identified as for student housing, I guess.
Well, just multifamily in general.
Yeah, multifamily in general, private development since, let's say, since January of 2016. This number does include some rehabs, so not new development. And I will stress, and I can get you new numbers next week, this is not net. And sometimes when we talk about these numbers, people forget that things like Evolve had large developments on them that were torn down.
Right.
But we have roughly 6,000 units and 3,300 units, and I'm sorry, 3,300 beds. Oh my gosh, 3,300 units and 6,300 beds. And we sent that information, I believe, to you guys earlier today. We were asked to review something that you received from the public that had a lot of misinformation in it. So we sent those totals as well, just to clarify what's been actually done since 16.
And just one more figure, how many total housing units are there in the city to the nearest 1,000?
Oh, I don't know, but I can find that out.
I mean, at last I knew it was about 22, but there's been a lot built. So, I mean, do you have that figure? I think it's crucial to understanding.
Sure, I do not have it offhand, but I can get that, and might be
okay. When you can, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think Councilmember Smith was first.
I had one bite at the apple. Does somebody else go?
You're correct. So Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, thank you. Could Ms. Ganlon, could you please speak briefly to Section 5 of the ordinance, which talks about reporting?
Oh, yes.
What kind of reporting would the staff
sure. So
make on the results of this ordinance?
Yeah, great. Thank you for bringing that up. We would be, what we were planning on doing, and then the Plan Commission was most comfortable having it appear in the ordinance, which I think makes sense. We would be tracking both requests and approvals for all plexes, basically, including, remodels that would be coming in under the code that currently can't happen. And where those are located, basically who's making them, how, when they're coming in. So again, requests and approvals. And then we would be planning to report those findings to the Administration, Plan Commission, and this council every 6 months. Idea being, we do think this is a good proposal. We think it will be incremental. If that it does end up, if it appears that is not going to happen, we don't, that is what we want to happen. So if something needs to be changed, then we want to be reporting to the decision-making bodies so that we can come back if we need to make changes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Further first round questions? We have about 7 minutes remaining. Okay, I don't see any other first round. Councilmember Smith, I think I'll take a bite. Ms. Scanlon, you mentioned that this is an additional housing form that's needed because we need housing. And you also said that if it's going to have an effect on affordability, then we're talking about adding many more. housing units in the community. I disagree with you that this is going to be anything but rental. I think it will be rental because we allow ADUs right now, which require owner occupancy. So my question is, how many conversions of single family homes to plexes do you anticipate having an effect on the housing that's required in your mind? Are they thousands of homes that would be converted to plexes?
Yeah, I'm not sure that we have an exact number. I think, again, it's a part of an array of proposals that we think could potentially have a downward impact on cost. And as it related to whether or not they're rental, we do also have high rental costs here in town, and we have a lot of rental people who live in town that do rent. And so the lowering of rental costs could also have a benefit for this community. But yes, I do not believe that we have an exact number of how many we think would tip the scale. We do think that more needs to be done, including, in concert with the other things the administration's doing, like money for first-time home buyers, those types of things, to change what we've been practicing now for decades that hasn't done anything but increase cost.
Okay, I guess what I'm getting at is that in order to have effect on supply and demand, we're talking, and we've approved thousands of rental units. So I'm anticipating that what we're doing is creating thousands of more, and that would mean conversion of hundreds or perhaps thousands of single family homes to rentals, to duplexes.
I do not think we are not anticipating thousands of conversions. I think in this community, if we saw hundreds in the first 5 years, we'd be back here discussing it. We do not think that is going to be the pace. That's not what we're anticipating. We don't think this is the answer for increasing our housing, for addressing our housing issue. We just think it's part of the solution. And we do think it's one of the things that we think is most appropriate at a slower pace.
Councilmember Volan, did you have a question?
Well, it was a follow-up to your question. So I think Ms. Scanlon came close to answering it. I mean, I'm looking for a ballpark figure order of magnitude. So if you don't think it's going to be thousands, in 5 years, do you think it might be 100, 300, 500?
I think that it will. I think that if it comes through as allowed, as permitted, if we have more than 20 in the first year, you will ask us to come back, unless they are clearly of the type that the most vocal in the community are okay with. I just think it's going to be slow. I think our notice of violation provision excludes a number of our more absentee landlords, and that the opportunity, it's just part of a toolbox opportunity for people to be able to have options on how to live here. So
just to reiterate, per year, you're expecting the number of conversions of single family homes throughout the city as a result of this ordinance to be in the 2 digits?
I think that, yes, I do think so. I think starting out, yes, I believe so.
Okay.
I mean, that is what I think, yeah.
Thank you, I appreciate it, thank you.
Councilmember Smith, you had your hand up for some time.
Thank you, Mr. Rallo. I was going to follow up somewhat on your line of questioning and Mr. Boland's. Ms. Scanlon, supply and demand, I get that. And so eventually, if we have enough units, prices should have a downward pressure. Is that your premise?
I think eventually, yes. But even in the short term, if you buy a lot now and you buy it for $350,000 in one of our historic neighborhoods, if you do a conversion and create a second unit and sell that to someone else, you're not selling it to them for $350,000. And now they're able to live in that area as well for less. We would be opening opening our traditional single family zoning districts to more people. That's the idea.
Well, my follow-up question was going to be, how long do you think it will take for the downward pressures to be felt in our community?
Yeah, I just think it's a false connection, right? So allowing duplex as an option isn't going to do that on its own. We have to do other things, and other things are happening, such as the development of the old hospital site or working with property owners on larger areas. But this is just one option that we think could be helpful.
Thank you, and I appreciate you being in the hot seat tonight. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Further questions? Councilmember Flaherty, we have just a couple of minutes remaining.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to follow up on the notion of affordability, and I guess, of course, supply and demand in the aggregate housing context has some impact, if not in lowering prices, at least stemming the rise. But I don't think, my understanding of this proposal is that it's more about the housing type and its affordability. Specifically, you kind of alluded to the fact that when two units share the cost of one plot of land, that naturally makes them lower cost, whether rented or owned. Also that there's less space to turn on the lights, heat, cool, et cetera, typically with a smaller unit in a duplex. And then transportation costs, if you are living closer to where you work, play, can reduce a car, whatever. Those are kind of the main things I think of. Are there other aspects of affordability that are sort of in the immediate term by virtue of the characteristic of the housing type, as opposed to a supply and demand conversation? Are there other things that staff is aware of or thinking of?
I think proposing this housing type in existing areas has also other affordability relations, because there is already infrastructure in areas where we have developed single family housing. So we have roads already, we have sewer access, water access, those types of things that don't need to be put in new, as they do in newly developed areas, such as our subdivisions in the southwest side of town. When those things have to be put in new, those costs have to be passed on. So while you may not be paying for location in those areas, you are paying for the developer basically having to build all of the things that already exist in other parts of town. So I think that's also a big contributor to the possibility of an effect on affordability.
Thank you. I hadn't thought of that.
I see that we have now reached about 20 minutes. So we will proceed now to the next point in our agenda, which is introduction of amendments. Would someone like to introduce an amendment?
Yes, Chair Rollo, and I'm not seeing anybody's faces, so it's a little frustrating. Am I unmuted? Can you recognize me?
Yes, we can hear your voice and see you.
Yes, I would suggest I propose Amendment 1.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Okay, we'll proceed with Amendment 1. These are co-sponsors, myself, Councilmember Sandberg, and Councilmember Smith. And we will proceed with 15 minutes for our summary of our amendment. Mr. Lucas, if you could display the amendments and perhaps at the time focus on the points of the comprehensive plan, the specifics of the comprehensive plan as we proceed. I'll begin with 5 minutes to be followed by Councilmember Smith for 5 minutes, and then Councilmember Sandberg will wrap it up. The Plan Commission has given us a UDO revision that permits duplexes in R1, R2, and R3 districts. That is in essentially every neighborhood in Bloomington. This is a massive change in zoning that reverses policies that we've held for decades. For instance, the no more than 3 unrelated adults rule that limited overoccupancy will now change to 6 in a house if it is duplexed. This amendment, sponsored by Councilmembers Sandberg, Smith, and myself, Amendment 1, removes duplexes from R1, R2, and R3 districts. The principal effect of either the permitted use or, as the administration recommends, conditional use of duplexes is to convert single-family homes in all neighborhoods to rentals. We, the sponsors, see this as a profound and radical change that is at odds with our stated goal of promoting owner occupancy in neighborhoods. Owner occupancy has long been held as an important means to stabilize neighborhoods, going back to Murakami Allison. Her work reversed the impact of high ratios of neighborhood rentals and is responsible for the integrity, cohesiveness, and growing owner occupancy of our neighborhoods that we see today. Our city already has code to allow owner-occupied duplexes. These are called accessory dwelling units, ADU. And I support this existing code, which is one avenue for creating affordable housing. But allowing houses to become duplexes without owner occupancy requirement of ADUs, whether by permitted or conditional use, simply paves the way for developers to convert homes to rentals. The rental units will not be affordable. There is no way to assure that whatsoever. So one should expect them to rent at market rate. Students drive the rental market in Bloomington, and many will pay $600 to $1,000 per room to live in these converted homes. What we are doing here, allowing plexes, whether by permitted or conditional use, is giving a clear profit signal to the development community to purchase homes and convert them. The development community and the private equity firms who see investments such as this as highly lucrative will seize on this opportunity. Both the Upland Regional Housing Study and the 2020 Bloomington Housing Study indicate a lack of single-family homes for buyers. Permitting duplexes in R1 through R3 will only further reduce the supply of single-family homes and is therefore likely to increase the price of them. Furthermore, the proposal to allow plexes by permitted or conditional use will place home buyers in competition with developers, further driving up the cost of single-family homes. This proposed conversion to rentals occurs in a market where 66% of housing units in our community are already rentals. Why act to reduce something we desperately need, single-family homes, and convert them to rentals, which we already have an abundant supply? This is nonsensical. Building home equity is an important way that people establish savings and retain wealth. By reducing the supply of starter homes, the most likely to be plexed in the core neighborhoods, we are aiding and abetting a rent trap. Besides the threat to neighborhood integrity, by reducing owner occupancy, besides driving up housing costs, this scattershot approach to increasing density in the city runs counter to the comprehensive plan, our guiding document that took years of work, engaging residents, consulting neighborhoods, hiring a consultant, and which states clearly and repeatedly against this form of density within neighborhoods. The comprehensive plan says, quote, existing core neighborhoods should not be the focus of the city's increasing density, page 60. Quote, Bloomington's older, small-scale, compact, single-family housing market must be protected, page 61. Quote, avoid placing these high-density forms in single-family neighborhoods, page 64. Quote, the conversion of dwellings to multifamily should be discouraged, page 84. Instead, the comprehensive plan directs these forms, density with a purpose, along corridors with a goal of developing village centers, which also, by the way, promote local economic development. This is why we, the sponsors, include a concept plan of where these plex forms should go, as directed by the comp plan and land use map on page 84. Why are we disregarding our guiding planning document? Why are we converting single-family homes to apartments, reducing the housing form that we need? Why are we deregulating zoning that gives tremendous profit incentive for private capital to invest in this conversion of neighborhoods? The administration describes this as an experiment on Bloomington. On this point, I agree. It is a massive experiment that has tremendous risk for our community. Whether by permitted or conditional use, it is a zoning change affecting nearly all neighborhoods in Bloomington. We've seen this experiment before in Bloomington neighborhoods as they struggled in the 1970s and 80s to avoid exploitation by profit-driven development interests. Please support Amendment 1 and vote for density that is intelligently planned to maintain affordability, the possibility of home ownership, and the quality of life for all. That ends my comment. I'll go now to Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Rallo. I want to follow up on Mr. Rallo's comments and repeat that the amendment Ms. Sandberg, Mr. Rallo, and I propose removes duplexes by right from R1, R2, and R3. Today, we're being asked by the Hamilton administration to vote for allowing duplexes pretty much anywhere and everywhere. We're once again listening to our friends and neighbors we're doing our homework and we're trying to make a good decision. Upzoning appeared to be settled during the last council. It was voted down in 2019 after hundreds of people showed up over multiple meetings and testified they were against the duplexes and it would cause them harm. It is outrageous because there are 4 new council members that the administration is bringing this back. Council members may have changed, but the public sentiment hasn't. The comprehensive plan, allegedly our guiding principles, discourages unrestrained development anywhere and everywhere. The mayors call this an experiment we can stop. Well, this experiment was already tried and it failed, as Council Member Rallo talked about. Almost destroyed Elm Heights. I was in Elm Heights today. They're still talking about it. Mayor Tommy Allison, with the help of Charlotte Zietlow, helped rein in the experiment. Isn't the definition of insanity trying the same thing multiple times and expecting a different result? Upzoning changes are, by any description, a radical and severe change. It will cause long-lasting harm to the ability of people to purchase older, affordable homes, where we should help people build assets. I have an idea. Let's be big and bold. If we're serious about developing diversity in neighborhoods, let's take $20 million out of the $23 million that this city is going to get from the feds from the American Rescue Plan and help lower income people buy affordable homes, fixers up, if you will, through a $10,000, $15,000 grant, somewhat like a land bank. We could help somewhere around 2,000 people acquire a home that will help them build wealth, give them an opportunity to move up, maybe out of poverty, as well as build generational wealth and pass it on to their subsequent family members. This really has an impact. What's the reason for Mayor pushing for duplexes and multiplexes with no solid evidence? In the face of overwhelming opposition by the majority, by 7-1, people in Bloomington. Is it for affordable housing? Is it for diversity? Or is it to increase the tax base for the city? This is really a recipe for a real estate developers free-for-all. And it's likely that it will be ruining some of the reasons why we live in Bloomington. My gosh, I just don't understand it. I really welcome the presentations and the great discussion from Ms. Scanlon as they advocate for the position the city wants to take. I also want to remind and encourage everyone to be respectful in your comments, and please be kind on what is certainly an emotional issue. Thank you. And now I'd like to pass it on to co-sponsor Susan Sand.
Thank you. The Bloomington community thought this matter had been settled in 2019, but here we are again. One difference now is the very same public pushback, only with larger numbers of frustrated constituents who have counted on local government to protect single-family home ownership in a college community with rental pressures. I have always trusted the Bloomington public to know when their interests in livability and their home investments in stable neighborhoods are being threatened. Many long-term residents know full well what results when the protective guardrails are removed by local leadership and market rates and rental pressures erode the stability of their neighborhoods. Our housing history shows us what happens when the public sector deregulates and the resulting challenges in clawing back neighborhood stability takes decades. Ask former Mayor Tommy Allison. She will tell you. This is a major shift in growth policy, and the residents of Bloomington well know it. They feel it. They are angry, and rightfully so. Residents have been told by supporters of upzoning that increasing density in already dense and diverse neighborhoods will somehow promote affordability, but they are not buying it. Allowing the private sector free rein in these neighborhoods will most certainly result in market rates and profits for the developers and landlords, not a reduced cost for low to moderate income renters. That's just not how the real estate market works here, with a big university in our midst. Rents and housing costs continue to rise in Bloomington, and yet Bloomington average incomes and wages remain low and flat. The job opportunities here don't keep pace with the rising costs of living, something that was carefully studied in the 2019 report of the citizen-driven Affordable Living Committee, Working Harder, Falling Behind. How do we get beyond this struggle that has so deeply divided the city that we all love? First of all, we respect the broad public input that helped us sign off on the comprehensive plan, the vision document that, among other things, provides guidance for where more dense development can occur without doing wholesale damage to our established neighborhoods. The idea of placing more dense housing forms along major corridors and transportation lines along the edges of neighborhoods makes good sense, and we support that. We support allowing duplexes, triplexes, and quads to develop in a more planned, step-down manner from commercial centers to the borders of neighborhoods that we continue to protect through single-family zoning. The concept of village centers to reproduce desirable and walkable neighborhoods like those in the central downtown core and near the IU campus is an appealing concept strategy that we should pursue. The comp plan guides us to that concept. By promoting this plan that allows duplexes everywhere or plexes everywhere, and with no guardrails or even with conditions, as a cutting-edge progressive idea, the administration seems to be telling the Bloomington public, trust us. We are the experts, we know best. This will give us affordability, inclusivity, sustainability. It will make a dent in a housing shortage. It may take decades and affordability may need to trickle down after the free market does what it does, but trust us. And if this doesn't work, we can always rip out the policy page from the 3-ring binder, review the damage done, and make amends accordingly. A majority of Bloomington constituents are not placated by this assurance that all will be well. This is just not a piece of paper we are debating. This is brick and mortar change. By supporting Amendment 1, we direct the development of multifamily housing forms toward more suitable areas to experiment with upzoning while doing no harm to the built environment. We have an excellent tool for adding gradual density to core neighborhoods without doing harm, and those are ADUs, owner-occupied alternatives that we embrace as positive. Amendment 1 is a simple proposal that allows us to move forward slowly, more thoughtfully, and with all due respect for the engaged and informed Bloomington public. I look forward to hearing from our constituents on this amendment. Thank you.
That concludes our introduction of the amendment. Now we will go to council questions for 15 minutes before we go to the public to comment on Amendment 1 of Ordinance 2123. Would anyone like to ask a question? Councilmember Flaherty.
Sure. Thank you for the presentation. First of all, the 3 council members and sponsors of the amendment. Would love to hear from staff as well, if that's okay.
Yes.
Their reaction and thoughts on the proposal.
Thank you. Ms. Scanlon, would you like to comment?
Sure, yes. We will obviously not be supporting Amendment 1. The original proposal that went to Plan Commission called for duplexes as conditional in the 3 districts that are being proposed to be removed. We think it's kind of a slippery slope. We don't think duplexes are multifamily. It's the same number of units as having an ADU on your property, which we have already decided, and this council has already decided is appropriate all over town. Again, I will say adding the option for duplexes does increase the opportunity for an occupancy. It also increases the opportunity for rental. If we're trying to avoid rentals, then we should not allow them. If we're trying to increase our occupancy, then we think that we should. And one point that kind of keeps coming up, I invite everyone to study the zoning map when we talk about increased density making sense on the edges. We have that now on the edges of our neighborhoods. They are most often edged by actual multifamily zoning or commercial. And then in the R4 areas are the pockets that we found that maybe weren't edged. And then we'll talk about that more later. Yeah, we are happy to discuss, but for all the reasons we mentioned in the staff report, we would not be supporting the amendment. And I can answer any questions that are for me. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Scanlon. Further questions from council on the amendment, Amendment 1? Councilmember Volin.
Yeah, I want to ask about something, a distinction that hasn't really been made in this discussion. Duplexes can be incentivized to be built as condos that can be bought, just like a detached single-family house. Is it owner occupancy that the sponsors are trying to protect, or detached housing as well?
Would anyone else other than me respond? Councilmember Sandberg? Councilmember Smith?
I'm happy to say, in my mind, we're trying to, my thought is owner occupied. It's a way to build wealth. It's a way to have stable neighborhoods, and rentals are not. So.
And if I can just add, there's no guarantee at all. I mean, I don't think we're getting any assurances that, yes, they could be bought and sold as a condo or as an owner occupied structure. But what's our guarantee? We don't know that. And what's happening is by putting it in the neighborhoods, which the comprehensive plan discourages us from doing, it doesn't prohibit it. It just discourages it. It says, don't do it here. We're already dense. We're already diversified. There are other locations that's more appropriate for these multifamily forms to go. But there is no guarantee that they would be owner occupied. And that is one of the sticking points for the many constituents that we have been meeting with and talking with over these many, many weeks, is that with ADUs, there is a guarantee that it's owner occupied. And by having it owner occupied, there's more buy-in to the neighborhood. There's more buy-in to being a part of that core, as opposed to it being a rental property that, of course, does not provide that same, if you will, integrity or stability that the neighborhoods are most concerned about. So I would say that this is there's no assurance. And this is what we hear from the public is, it all sounds great on paper, but we think with the eventuality, and a lot of these homeowners are getting postcards in the mail.
Well, if I could clarify, I appreciate those answers. If I can clarify, the incentive that I'm thinking of is a tax abatement, which we've given for much larger projects. But if we really want to incentivize more housing in the core without risking rentals, if we had a program where duplexes or even larger plexes could be built and would get say a 5-year tax abatement on the condition that they be owner occupied, would that be objectionable to the sponsors?
My understanding is that cannot be done with a duplex. We cannot require it to be owner occupied. I don't know if tax incentives.
The key is that they would be required as a condition of the tax abatement.
So could I respond? Could I respond? I mean, yes, you're into fine tuning, and what I would say is that this form is recommended against in the comp plan in neighborhoods. Period. It says repeatedly that to avoid this form. And so, yes, you're recommending some kind of tweaking. I've seen various pro forma that show very lucrative incentives. We're putting a profit incentives on converting single family homes to rentals. So whatever you have in mind would have to be very competitive with that, I suppose. But the whole form itself is not recommended. It's recommended with a purpose in mind, and that is along corridors and at village centers. And it goes to great pains to say that, and actually recommends 20 sites within the city to do that.
I don't know that I totally agree with your interpretation of the plan, but I appreciate the answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions? I'm not seeing everyone. So Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, thank you. So a question for the sponsors. Is there a guarantee that single family homes will be owner occupied?
No, there isn't. They could rent too, absolutely. But again, the profit incentive is what we're talking about here of the conversion. Because you could take a home, have 3 unrelated adults, now you've doubled it. Does that answer your question? I'm not hearing.
Yes, sorry, I was shaking my head up and down.
I thought I had dropped out. Thank goodness, no. Further questions? Councilmember, well, let's just see, Councilmember Volin, any first round
question?
Okay, we're almost running out of time here, and I'd like to go to the public, but Councilmember Volin, please.
Yeah, so next question is, we've heard that there's several hundred existing duplexes in the city. These are all 6, 9, or 12 unrelated adults in a building. By the arguments that you've made, the sponsors have made, why should these continue to be allowed? If we abolish them, they could become single family homes we desperately need. What say you? Should we abolish existing plexes?
No. This is what we mean when we say these neighborhoods that are already dense are already diverse because of prior changes in zoning code that allowed the plexes to be developed. Those have now been incorporated into the fabric of the neighborhoods. We're not suggesting anything of the sort that those be changed. Those can certainly be grandfathered and kept. What we object to is the proliferation of even more of them at the expense of owner occupancy and home ownership and the single family protections that this city has always championed on behalf of these neighborhoods because we live in a rental community due to the large university in our midst.
I have one more question, but I'll wait for others.
Mr. Lucas, have we exhausted our time? Just checking.
We're just now coming up on 9 minutes of questions.
Oh, only 9 minutes, great, okay. Councilmember Volin, sorry.
Well, you know, we talk about our being a university community. The sponsors say they're listening to all their friends and neighbors, but students are literally half the population of the city. The census counts them here. They drink the water here. The vast majority of the district I represent is students. Do the sponsors consider students to be residents of Bloomington? And if so, have they been listening to what they need?
Absolutely. This is not a proposal that is anti or against students or where they live. They do live in our core neighborhoods. They do. They live in mine. They live across the street from me. This is not anti-student whatsoever. This is a protection of single-family home ownership, which we see as kind of a dinosaur if this gets passed, and we start losing our single-family stock to conversions to market rate rental properties, which we think is what's most likely to happen, as do the many people who live in these neighborhoods.
Well, if I may, while the sponsors, you know, well, the three of you, you know, believe that it's not anti-student, that's not the message we've been getting from the many people who've been writing against the proposal by the administration. They are explicitly saying that they are afraid of student renters who can pay top dollar and who make noise and party and all the like. So what do you say to the supporters of this amendment who are avowedly afraid that their neighborhood will have more students in it?
I think it's a matter of balance. I mean, 60% of Bryant Park neighborhood are rentals. So it's a matter of achieving balance. And we lost that balance in the 70s and 80s. And it took many years and many efforts, including the no more than 3 unrelated adult rule, to go back. And this is something that's been achieved in terms of owner occupancy versus rental balance. This tips the scales to rentals.
But you've just said that you know, existing plexes are okay, and they're full of more than 3 unrelated adults by definition. A duplex would still be 3 unrelated adults per unit, as existing ones are. So how is that changing in any way? The 3 unrelated adults rule is not being suspended or changed here. It's been in place since the 80s and it's staying that way.
Yes, but you, by subdividing the house, you used to be able to rent the 3 and now you can rent the 6.
But I mean, that's true for plexes that exist now.
That's true. And,
well,
but this essentially tips the balance to rentals in a big way.
I don't see it, but thank you for the answer.
If I may comment that the folks in Elm Heights who are really sending us a lot of emails and talking to us, they felt that in the 70s and 80s, the balance was tipped, and it really, you know, what you can say whatever you want about students. I don't really have a problem with students, but if our constituents have these worries, and I just talked to somebody in Elm Heights today, they are concerned of developers coming in, making duplexes, and again, 3 unrelated or 6 unrelated, and their neighborhood will go back towards the way it was. And they're not happy about that. And those are our constituents. And it's not my area of the city. I think it's yours, Mr. Bull. And I don't know what to tell you, except I'm trying to reflect and represent my constituents who are very worried about that.
I mean, would you say, Mr. Smith, that your constituents are worried about construction like Evolve or Brownstone Terrace? That's what happened in my district. It's what happened in Garden Hill and Old Northeast, is giant apartment buildings. None of that is being proposed here. Mr. Smith?
I understand. I understand. If somebody has a perception and they're concerned, the perception is as valid as, you know, yours or mine. And what can we do? We can only try to respond to the concerns of our constituents. And in this case, a lot of people are very concerned that this is a slippery slope, that it's gonna be a developer free for all. I heard today from the woman in Elm Heights. She said, do you know what? The people who are, when realtors find out that somebody's gonna list their home, they call a developer immediately and say, hey, this house is gonna go on the market. And the house never gets listed in Zillow or whatever. The developer buys it. And I didn't make it up. The people in Elm Heights are telling me this.
Well, okay, well, those are anecdotes, yeah.
And besides, I mean, this is really, I've heard from a number of people who are experts in this, private equity investors, finance professors, who say that the profit incentive is so strong to rent, to double the rents in these homes, that you're going to have conversion of these homes to rentals, and that's going to drive up housing costs. So I'm concerned about housing costs. I'm not only concerned about balance in neighborhoods, but I'm concerned about losing the very form that we need for low-income people to actually build equity in this community. And
everyone across the country is concerned about that, but thank you. You've answered my question very well.
And this is exactly the mechanism, either by conditional or by permitted use, to drive up housing costs.
But it's not unique to Bloomington, that's all I'm saying. Thank you.
Well,
we live in
we're incentivizing it. Councilmember Sims. Council President Sims.
Thank you. A little bit of a comment, then a question, and I'll just limit it to one because we have a lot of people who want to talk tonight. My main premise during this entire conversation, and I've listened to my colleagues, I've listened to the community, I've listened to experts on both sides of the issue. But the bottom line to me, and there's other factors, but it's supply and demand of our housing inventory. I get some of the experts' opinions, and I'm not here to say yes or no, but my question is this. Apparently there's going to be pressure that if in fact anything other than elimination of plexes in R1, 2, and 3, then there's going to be this glut on developers buying all the single family homes to convert them. And I know that there's a market price and it's a high price, but I guess I'm wondering, what is the other incentive? I'm a homeowner in this town. I also know that at one level you have starter homes. And then when you sell your home, then you move to the next level of home. And then the one you leave creates housing and on and up within that scheme. Part of the problem is I'm not so sure that everyone will rush out to sell their places at this point. There will be some because there is no next level market to move into, and then none above that. So I think there will be some. I think it's going to take time, but I think the more we increase is going to put downward pressure, hopefully on the overall market. I guess I would just like to hear a response on that.
Okay, I'll take that one. I'll take the last of your question first. To make a significant impact on supply, we're talking about conversion of thousands of homes, because we've been permitting, we've been agreeing and allowing thousands and thousands of rental units. This council has. So if that is the goal, then we're going to be converting hundreds or thousands of homes. And so the public should know that their neighborhood is going to turn decidedly rental, okay, to have an impact. But I would just go back to your first part of your question is that the profit incentive now of renting to 6 unrelated adults in a home by adding a bedroom or two, or adding a bedroom in the basement or whatnot, subdividing a home, or say, requires a wall in the middle and a kitchen and bathroom on either side, and separate meters, and maybe an additional bedroom or two. That's pretty cheap to get very lucrative return. So you are having developers now bid against home buyers, and now you've doubled the profit. So you're doubling the profit by agreeing to conditional or to permitted use of this kind of form in neighborhoods. Well, and the profit incentive is so great, you're going to drive up home costs.
Well, thank you. I mean, I think I understand that, but I guess a more pointed version, even with that high profit they sell that home. Now, where do they go? We know the dearth of the single family market in this town at multiple levels. My concern is, do you still foresee that there will be thousands of homes that will be sold when there's really not enough space at the next level for people who sell their homes? I guess I just want to know, where would they go? If this happens, this market price and the pressure sells all those homes, where do all of our citizens go at that point?
Well, I think.
I mean, I'm just asking. I don't.
Yeah, well, with the profit that they would make, perhaps they buy a high-end condo downtown, or perhaps they live in the county. They've made a tremendous profit. So I can predict where they're going to go, but.
Well, I think that was kind of my question. Where would they go?
Well, I don't know.
Okay.
But the point is that, it raises housing costs. I mean, I think it's fairly straightforward. Councilman Sandberg, did you have something to add?
Yes, I think we can all speculate here. I think we've heard from the administration, we've heard from the planning staff that they don't anticipate the worst is going to happen. I think we, on the other hand, are a little bit more concerned based on what we're hearing from our constituents that things could escalate fairly quickly in terms of the kind of the changes in our core neighborhoods that we've tried to protect to be owner occupied. So we really don't know. None of us do. But I think the point is, do no harm. That is what I've been saying all along. Let's take a more conservative approach to this. Let's not put duplexes in the core at this particular time, since no one really knows. So I would like to hear from the public. I think they're going to inform us probably more than anyone about these questions of what are they going to do?
I agree. And I would just add, since the code's been enacted, we've been in a pandemic. And so investors are probably risk averse. So I wouldn't say that is a good model of those 178 single family homes that haven't been affected much, but in any case.
One comment,
yes,
if I can.
Councilmember Smith, and then we'll go to the public.
Is that President Sims, I take your point. The one thing though, from my own personal...
It was just a question, not to cut you off, but it was just a question. So go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah. My brother lived in Southern California for about 50 years. And he bought his house for about 140,000 20 some years ago and sold it for about 400,000 recently. And well, he actually left the community because the real estate prices were just outrageous. And so he actually moved closer to me. So I was a benefit of that. But I think if people are going to take their profits, maybe they're going to leave Bloomington. And I don't think that's a great avenue. Kind of worries me.
So
thank you.
I'm sorry to say that we've exhausted our time. So we will now go to the public.
I have a question.
Well, we're past time.
But
I've just had my hand up and other people have been called on. I don't know if you could see me on your screen or something. I've just had my hand up.
All right, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask, because it's been talked about, our developers bidding now against homeowners. I think what's happening right now?
Yeah, so yes, that's something we hear often. If we do this, developers will bid against homeowners. That's already happening. Buying a home in town now is exorbitant. We've seen some examples. We recently saw an example brought on West 9th Street. There's a house where the assessed value is a certain amount. Well, if that house goes for sale, it's going to sell for a lot more than the assessed value if you look at the other houses that have sold in that area. Some of those homes we have also then seen immediately turn around to remodel by local people who do local rentals. And also to this point, I would like to say, yes, we have been in a pandemic. Plan Commission approved 1,000 units in 2020. That's more than the average number of units in any other year since 2016. From 2016. So developers, while they may be risk averse in general, they are developing here. And so that is why we wanted to bring to light the 178 number and that yes, they are looking now, they are not looking at plexes currently.
All right, so that concludes the question period. So Mr. Lucas, we will now go to public comments on Amendment 1 of Ordinance 2123.